Discussing an idea of making a documentary about Dennis Hopper was not an easy road, I have to tell you. Because number one, Dennis Hopper would never allow a documentary to be made about him. See, American Dreamer is not a documentary. It's an actor playing a role in a film that you think is a documentary.
The power of film. I was driving along one time on the way from Dodge City to Garden City where the big farm was, whipping down this dirt road, going about 70. There was a strong wind coming from the right, and I was really leaning into it. I think that I've been fighting the wind or fighting whatever it is for so long that I really have a great fear that if I stop turning the wheel hard into the wind, that I'll go into the ditch.
I don't know if it was Kit Carson that introduced me to Dennis Hopper or if it was Annie Leibovitz, but one of the two did. And I met Dennis just after he had finished the last movie. I, like everybody else, had seen Easy Rider, and it was a very, very important film that said a lot about what took place in the 60s. Well, you see, I started as a young photojournalist. My father gave me a camera, I think, when I was like 12 years old. And by the time I was 13, I was going door to door, taking snapshots and then going back and selling the pictures to the people. I eventually, wound up, believe it or not, photographing skid marks on automobile accidents and selling the pictures to insurance companies, because a skid mark tells you the story of an accident, how fast the car was going and so forth. I earned enough money to buy my first car. So I was into the economic side besides the photographic side of photography. And I went to La Jolla High School, where I photographed a lot of athletes. Went to Pepperdine, and by the time I was at Pepperdine in Los Angeles, I was published already in Life magazine. I was double-page color in the Saturday Evening Post. And then I went to work for a French magazine called Paris Match. Paris Match was a very important magazine. It was the Life magazine of Europe. And I was very fortunate that they didn't have a photographer in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles, was the center of cinema. It was the center of movie stars, Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable. The irony is that I photographed Dennis Hopper when he was an actor on a movie called Cool Hand Luke. But what happened is, in the early 70s, the magazines were going out of business, and I had to find a new profession. So I decided to become a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker. And I decided to walk across the street from one corner to another. But I have to tell you, I didn't know how long a walk it was going to be. And it was a long walk. And what you see in this film is not an accomplished filmmaker. You don't see Larry Schiller as somebody that knows his craft. You don't see Larry Schiller really knowing how to use the Eclair camera, because I was shooting second camera.
Have you ever had a fantasy about bowling a stewardess in a bathroom? No. Here comes one right now. There we go.
Kit was a wonderful young filmmaker. I mean, he made early experimental films, and I really admired him because he was quite different than me. And we talked about whether we could do a film about Dennis Hopper submerging himself in the myth of the character of Easy Rider. And that was the original premise of American Dreamer. But of course, a lot of things changed as time went on.
I can't believe it. Hi, Larry. Hi, Kit.
The opening scene in the film is very interesting. It was shot almost towards the end of the film, but it was planned as the opening. How do you enter somebody's life? That was the question I said, what's the opening? And all of a sudden in a discussion, and I don't know who had the idea, well, why don't we just be photographing a door, knock on the door, and the door opens, and there's Dennis. You're now walking into his life.
Terrific.
And of course, then Dennis, the actor, came up with the idea that he should be completely nude. He should be in the middle of taking a bath, and the camera should follow him back to the bathtub. And I came up with the ideas that the water should be filthy dirty. I said, because if you live most of the time in Taos, where there's a lot of dirt and grind and this and that, then let's make the water really filthy dirty. And then I think Kit came up with the idea, well, maybe we should throw in the words,
Just act natural. Just act natural? Come around here. Pretend you're not here.
Bert Schneider was the son of Abe Schneider, who was president of Columbia Pictures at the time. Bert was the man who produced the Monkees, and was just doing, when we were doing Easy Rider, they were just finishing up the film of the Monkees. I forgot what it was called, but the Monkees film. And when we were done with Easy Rider, Bert showed it to his father. Now this is what I heard. I can't swear to this is true, but I'm pretty sure it is. And Abe Schneider said, this is not up to Columbia's standards. Now Columbia was damn near bankrupt at the time. We did something with no stars, basically. We did it for like $380,000. And the picture made in those days, I think roughly 33 million, which was considering 1960, what was it, 1968, 1969 revenue, you would think that the $33 million is probably $120, $130 million today.
We met through the scene. We met through Dean Stockwell, probably, Russ Tablin, you know, those guys. I was Dennis's agent. You know, the Easy Rider had come out, and it was a huge hit. Everybody wanted to make deals with Peter or Dennis.
Dennis and I were walking, I don't know what happened, we were walking in Sunset Boulevard for some reason, and Dennis, oh geez, I forgot we're supposed to be at lunch in Jules Stein's house. And Jules Stein was the president of Universal, Dr. Stein. I said, Dennis, are you serious? I said, look at us. I mean, we looked like we always did. We looked like, you know, worse than I am now. We looked like bums. And he said, no, don't worry about Dr. Stein. I know him really well. We go up to Stein's house. We walk in. He's having sit-down lunch with the editor of Time magazine. His wife is there. And I forgot a couple other people in Doc, Dennis and I. And there's like a gasp. Dr. Stein looks at him and says, I don't know. Anyway, please, he said, please, they're so gracious, please sit down, have some lunch. So he sat down, and he's talking to this guy from Time, and he says, you know something? He said, see these two guys? They just made a film that's going to make $30-some million. Why are they not at Universal?
Bert had first shot at the last movie, BBS, with Dennis. And Dennis insisted that he star in it. And Bert said, no, I want you to direct it. And let's get an actor, you know, to do it. And Dennis says, no, I want to do it. And he came to me. So I made a deal for him at Universal to do this. And I insisted that he get final cut. And they also must show the movie, distribute it, in New York and Los Angeles, and it has to play in first-class theaters for a week. They said fine. It came back to haunt me.
But like, you know, the last movie is going to be acceptable. It's going to be accepted. It's going to be much better than Easy Rider. And if it's nothing more than like, you know, the Magnificent Ambersons, which was Orson Welles' second film, and like Citizen Kane was his first, made no money, and Magnificent Ambersons made no money.
Dennis Hopper was a true filmmaker. Dennis Hopper wouldn't allow anybody to have control of the last movie. That's part of our documentary. He had final cut, he had final approval of advertising or promotion. And the thing you have to admire about Dennis Hopper is he didn't want final cut, final approval, or any creative input in our film, because that would be hypocrisy.
I loved working with Dennis. I really did. He always made sense in directions and so on. And I just felt he was talented. I had the feeling we were making a good movie.
Here's to Mr. Hopper, who has traded in his chopper for a gamble in the South American sun.
We were, you know, a major publicized film. I mean, we had every magazine, every major newspaper, we had all these writers, everybody coming down. That's what we had in Peru. I mean, we were inundated with the press. We were going to be the next great thing, you know, in the history of films.
I was the executive producer of the movie, and Paul Lewis was the hands-on, on the set producer. So I didn't have to be there. I was there more, let's finish it, let's get a marketing plan for it, what theaters do we want to get, how are we going to promote it. You know, I was more into the release of the movie. You know, so we didn't have that many production problems in the making of it.
When I first arrived in Peru, I'd heard all those things, but when I walked on the set, I didn't see people drinking and slobbing around and all that sort of thing.
We had a group of people who enjoyed smoking, let's put it that way. And the minute they got on the plane, saying, "Oh my God, this is UPSA, a Peruvian airline, we're out of the country." The minute they got on the plane, they were, quote, out of the country, so everybody lit up joints. And they tried to force the stewardesses to smoke. The stewardess went into the pilot and said, "These people are drug people. They're all coming. They're all doing drugs on the plane." They get a call in Peru from the guy from the airlines. I met the guy from the airlines, who was a Romanian Jew, and I'm Jewish, and we sort of had a wonderful relationship for the few days that I knew him. He calls me. He says, "I got a big, big problem." He says, "The police are going to arrest everybody the minute they got off the plane." Oh, so you have a big problem. I got a big problem. He says, "The best thing we can do is I'll have another plane here. The minute they get off the plane in Lima, you put them right on the next plane. There's no waiting, nothing else. Get everybody immediately, one plane to the other plane, and fly them up to Cusco." And that's what we did. And got there, and nobody, made an issue after that, except the secret police were, sort of nosing around a lot. Dennis confiscated all the drugs that everybody had, and I think he did them all himself, but that's another story.
We got out by the skin of our teeth, and Dennis proceeded to go to New Mexico, and that's when he started editing the movie.
Back abroad when they're fighting, right?
He wanted to be as far away from Hollywood as he possibly could be. It was all in Taos.
When we were doing Easy Rider, we went to Taos and looked around Taos, and we shot in Taos, or in the Taos area. A nice portion of the film, we shot the jailhouse scene there, and not the exterior, but the interior of the jailhouse. We shot the dope where they picked up the drugs and everything else there, and a few other scenes. And he fell in love with Taos. Taos itself was like this dream. When he got money, he bought the house, the Maple Dodge house, and moved there, and he moved this whole operation. He brought the editing stuff there, and we cut the picture there.
I remember when Dennis picked us up at the airport, he had a pistol that he kept out. Because people were actually shooting at him because they were angry at him for, I don't know what he did, but I'm sure they didn't like it. And the town had nothing to offer. There were no restaurants. There was nothing there. It was really on the frontier.
You like we're here. That's where, after the Arroyo Seca incident, they came by and shotgunned the front of the theater. What was that incident?
Well, one of the things in making American Dreamer, since we were working in a home, the Maple Dodge home out in Taos, New Mexico, which is outside of Santa Fe, for those that may not know the region, is that everybody was living there together, kind of like communal living, because everybody was editing and working with Dennis on the film. When Dennis approved the fact that we would make this film, The American Dreamer, he told everybody that they were going to be on camera, and of course everybody had to sign releases. So everybody knew that they were going to be filmed. They may not have liked to be filmed every moment of their lives, if you know what I'm saying, but basically nobody was surprised that they were being filmed.
Do you think that you continue to make a flow happen?
No, definitely not.
I mean, you do feel that you are a little insensitive in certain areas.
Yeah, but I feel that also if we were sitting with the cameras all the time and we're able to relax ourselves, I mean, we're put on guard by you and other people in the house also by the fact that people do get very uptight when we walk in with cameras. We tried sitting with cameras just in our hands and not shooting them.
Like you're dealing with people in the house who've never dealt with film before. You and I have dealt with film, Larry.
I never felt terribly intimidated. I did feel sometimes that I was stuck in between Larry and Dennis because they were arguing almost all the time, and as a cameraman on a documentary, I was in between. So I just kept rolling.
Turn it on.
Okay, well, say you're running on a tape and he's running on a film. It's the same difference. Say it.
I shouldn't say that. I'm not running out of tape.
There's no honest men in the movie business except me. What are you?
You have
Oh,
a
you're in the sound
defined
business. I
period of
see.
time in which to photograph. So we just shot all the time. I can't tell you how much footage I shot. All I know is I kept on calling LA and saying, send more film, send more film.
I don't believe in reading. I don't care about reading. It means nothing to me.
There was no real written script. There was a concept. And each day or every couple days, we would discuss what Dennis was doing in his life and how that could work itself into the film. So we might discuss, well, Dennis, we're going to have a big dinner tonight, so why don't we play around with that concept of moving forward in time, moving backward in time. You know, I'll put a Nagra recorder in the center of the table, and, you know, we'll record what's going on. Then people could listen to what was just filmed. So we would talk about that. Maybe at another point we said, well, you know, you're out here all alone, this and that. The only thing you're missing, Dennis, is an orgy.
Have we got broads coming, guys?
Have we got broad?
They think they got playgirls, play bunnies, something coming down. They're making this documentary called The American Dreamer, and I said, how can I be American Dreamer without broads?
So, you know, we sent, I think, Dennis's brother and somebody else down to the Albuquerque or one of the airports. And as these young girls that were maybe coming off alone, we'd say, how would you like to be in a film with Dennis Hopper? Well, there wasn't anybody that would say no.
Yeah, I was there at different times when they were shooting it. I was there when they did the bathtub scene, for instance.
Where there's a will, there's a way, and I'm willing to get on home to you.
I must tell you that when Dennis told me he was going to do it, I told him I don't think he should do it. I thought it was the wrong move for him. Then he didn't pay attention to me, and he went and did it anyway. It was his choice. I mean, I tried to push him, but not in a negative way. You know, Dennis, come on, we got to get this done. Oh, yeah, you're right. I'll do it. I promise I'll do it. You got to, you know. But I'd have to be there constantly to do that, and it was impossible to be there constantly.
And like, I suppose, like, you know, everybody says, well, this is really where the movie's made, and it may be, but it's still boring.
Even if I was there constantly, I might have gotten drunk myself, you know, or I might have gotten stoned myself, and that, so it would have been the same problem. I mean, it's not that it's not that he didn't do what he wanted to do. It's just that the process took such a long time, and he was not really in a rush to do it.
I went down 3 times. There was nothing I could do. You know, he was on his trip. I can talk to him, I can make sense. The studio wanted to see the movie. It took quite a while before they saw it. And when he showed them his, more or less, what he thought was his final cut at the time, I told him this is going to be a problem. They're going to have to release it, you know, but they're not going to back it, I'm sure. And he said, well, this is a movie I want to make. It's great. I showed it to everybody. I showed it to all my friends. They love it.
Jodorowsky came up. Oh, you should do this and do this and do this and do this and do this. And Dennis listens to him and redoes it. And he says, oh, that's all wrong. Let's go back again. Berletsky, you know, I mean, he tried. You know, there's no problem. But it was, I don't want to get into too much detail, but it was a very unique experience.
They asked me, because I said I was really bored with the fucking life. They said, what would you do, man, if you could do anything? And I said, I think I'd go to the hot springs with 3 chicks. No, I think it'd be 6 chicks. No, I think it would be 30.
You always wonder what the reaction of people that you're filming is going to be. And I think probably after about 3 weeks of us hanging around, I think a lot of people are going to say, when is this going to stop?
You're going to stop. I really can't handle it.
I know we were coming and going over a 3-month period.
It's not out front.
You know, this documentary was done kind of like a magazine photographer shoots a story, except there was an actor playing himself in the film. So there was no dailies, not, you know, like you in the traditional filmmaking. You didn't have it processed and then they send it to you, or you didn't go to a screening room or this or that. So quite honestly, I didn't see any of the footage for the first 3 weeks until I went back on the first trip. And I don't even remember whether I liked it or I didn't like it. I don't have any memory of my first reactions to it. But, you know, after seeing the first bit, I didn't see anything until we were ready to cut the film. I didn't want to see it because I didn't want to second guess what I was doing.
The original freak's here.
I didn't want to say, well, I can make this better. No, that should be that. I wanted to make the film as raw as I could. I didn't want the film to be a polished movie.
We screened at Universal, who were financing us, and our original screening, we were in the screening room at Universal. Dennis and I, the editor, I guess David I'm sure must have been there, maybe a couple other people. In walked 15 people. They sat down together, we rolled the picture. They stood up, got out, and walked out together.
Yeah, but I can't stand their ego trips. Well, I cut it, and I directed Bob Wise and that, and I selected it, and I don't do it. I think they're full of shit to do it, too. I'm going to tell them, too, by the way.
They wanted to take it over and see what they could do, but I got him final cut. And my hands were tied, and there was a breach with me and him there. I had to be honest. I had to say what I felt. It was my feelings, and I wish I was wrong. I wish it was something that was great and would have worked, you know, would have been what I anticipated initially, what it could have been. But it wasn't.
Bring the script in here, please.
Yeah. What's the most difficult thing about cutting, Dennis?
Sitting here.
And I thought Last Movie was a really very, very important film that was really mistreated.
My original thing was to take it to Cannes, to forget about the rest of this and just go to Cannes. And then I got talked into an April opening, you know, an Easter opening. And
It is surprising that we're still talking about this movie all these years later. I thought this was a movie I'd make and it would go out and do this or that or the other and then poof, disappear.
you might go back to this angle as long as you can't see.
The sound man and I figured after it came out that we were kind of obliged to go and see it. And we were probably the only two people in the theater in Manhattan and being kind of stunned by it.
David, did you talk to Danny Selznick? David Burlett, did you talk to him?
Well, the film was edited in LA, and Kit was out there a lot of the time. First time when Kit and I saw the film, we hadn't put any of the music to it, and we didn't like it at all. We felt that it was slow. We felt that it was a little too much, as you might say, Dennis' ego pontificating. There was something about it that was a little boring. And then I remember the editor turning to us at the end of the screening, and we were talking about how it just didn't work. He says, well, all movies are kind of boring without music. You see, I didn't know a lot about filmmaking.
Everybody wants a piece of your birthday cake.
Now, the editor had the music in his mind when he was cutting these scenes, but we didn't. But we didn't really know. And the editor, I have to give him all the credit in the world, because he's the one who selected which music went with which scenes.
The whole world in an uproar. Whole world upside down.
Dennis saw the film actually for the first time on a college campus, because the film was intended, as you may know, to be shown not in theaters, but only on college campuses. You know, his motivation of making the film was to reach a wider audience about himself as a form of publicity or promotion for the Last Movie. So I don't know whether Dennis really understood at that time what the effect of the film would be. Or maybe he didn't even care. Because as I said to you before, he said, it's your film, you go do it. So he saw it on a college campus, and we were not there. We didn't want to be there when he saw it. We were supposed to be there, Kit and I, and then we chickened out.
I
I am the greatest movie director in the world, and I am saying bullshit.
Hey, yeah, right. Bullshit.
Right. Right on.
And after that, the film was not shown for a number of years until Dennis decided that every time the last movie, which had failed at the box office, was shown at a film festival, it had to be shown with The American Dreamer. He thought that much of The American Dreamer that he didn't want the last movie shown without The American Dreamer being shown.
I can become Orson Welles, poor bastard. Just been turned down by the studio that, like, I'm making this movie for Universal International, when $500,000 picture, you know, for $500,000. I mean, if they can't build up Orson Welles making a movie for $500,000 and show it in the universities, then fuck them. And fuck the universities, fuck everybody, man. Because, like, you know,
Citizen Kane was Orson Welles' first, and he failed with Magnificent Anderson. So Dennis's first real big film is Easy Rider. And it's sad that the last movie, when it was not successful, and maybe it wasn't successful because of Dennis, you know, it destroyed his career for some 15 years until he was able to climb back, you know, out of the gutter and become really then a fine actor and a great filmmaker.
But you do understand that, like, all a man leaves is his word. Right? You do understand that. Like, you know, someday I'll be dead. What was that from that little bobble there? That was no giggle. That was like you were giggling? And what are you, acting with the camera?
He's always believed he'd become the greatest filmmaker ever. He always believed he was going to win at Cannes, and he wanted, how do I put it? He wanted success, you know. He wanted to make a great artistic film if he could. He wanted to consider himself as a great artist. And he was, as a still photographer, he was a wonderful photographer. His paintings are wonderful. His ideas in film are wonderful. There were a lot of negative reviews for the last movie. There was a writer, I believe his name was Foster Hirsch, for the New York Times. And his article started up by saying, "Don't dismiss Dennis Hopper." Truthfully, I love Dennis. I mean, he was like, almost in essence, my closest friend.
I, as a child, was very, very unhappy, and I was very lonely, and the only way I felt I could stop being unhappy and stop being lonely was to become something like an artist that would be, you know, so creative and so beautiful that everybody would say, wow.
Yeah, we had that moment where we were under the microscope, you know, with getting this type, because people were looking forward to seeing it. The man who did Easy Rider, what's his next picture going to be? And there was a breach for a number of years, and, you know, that mended, and we became good friends again.
Well, what I took away from making American Dreamer was I wasn't as good a filmmaker as my ego said it was. I really felt that I'd made a lot of mistakes in making the film. Of course, I never realized the film might be looked upon 40 years later in an entirely different light. You have to remember, I was still looking at this film through the eyes of a photojournalist. I wondered whether there was really a beginning, middle, and end to the story. And then I realized there didn't have to be a beginning, middle, and end. So I learned a lot, and I learned that I had a long road to go to become a filmmaker.
Sometimes a man must feel ill at ease for a chance to make his stand. He either lives inside set boundaries or takes his boundaries into hand. To live inside the rational lines is form and draw. Or to be a man who must be his own man and live outside the law.